Welcome back to Landing Zone Home. Today we're going to talk about RV generators, some questions and answers. But before we go there, I have finally got both of my books published and they're out and available on Amazon right now. You see them right here, and they are My RV Mentor and My Airstream Mentor. They are different books. They are focused on those types of recreational vehicles, and most of what you're going to see and hear today about RV generators are in those books, so check them out. I get many questions about RV generators, and I wanted to use this Q&A session here to try to provide some of the information as I see it. So let's get started. Real quickly, I'm going to talk about installed generators. Motorhomes and some fifth wheels come with generators already installed. I know you've seen some of these. Normally they're Onan type generators ranging from 3,000 watts on up. I've seen them as high as 10,000 watts. On motorhomes, they are usually either gasoline or diesel. Whatever the engine is what the generator would use. On fifth wheels, most likely you're going to see liquid propane as a fuel on a fifth wheel. This comes in real handy, and the one downside is they're quite expensive. The last fifth wheel that I had a 5500 Onan generator, and it cost about $6,000. So that's something to consider. So why do we even need a generator when we're RVing? Well, there's a couple of reasons. If you're boondocking or somewhere where power is not available, then the number one reason you'd want a generator is to keep your battery charged. You could run your battery down very quickly when you're boondocking just from the lights, water pump, and not even considering using a television. Shore power is almost always provided at campgrounds, but some campgrounds, especially like National Park System, they do not provide shore power. If you're boondocking or dry camping, you're not going to have shore power. So the first thing you'd want to do is to find some way to keep your batteries charged. If you have solar, then that may be one alternative that you could use, but that's a different subject. Generators are the most versatile way to keep your batteries charged and to run the high wattage appliances in your RV. High wattage, I mean things like your microwave and your air conditioner. Televisions don't take quite as much power, but that's what the generator is for, is to run those types of things to make your camping experience a little more comfortable. And we also know that you'd want to keep your phones and your tablets and your computers charged up. That's a real good way to do that. You never know when you're camping when you're going to lose your shore power, so having a generator available only gives you more flexibility. So what should you consider when you're shopping for a generator? Well, there's four basic things I've outlined in my notes here. I don't usually use notes, but I did today. And that is the generator capacity. Generators are sized by wattage. 2,200 watts, 3,000, 3,500, and it just goes up and up from there. So you'll want to understand what your needs are, what you want to run, and then get a generator that can provide the correct amount of wattage to run those items. So that's the first thing you want to consider. Second is the weight. The weight of the generator is going to determine where you store it and how easily you're going to be able to maneuver it. A lot of the portable generators are going to come with wheels, and that makes it easy to maneuver once you get it onto the ground or onto a surface, providing it's pretty much a hard surface. The wheels don't work very well in gravel, and they don't work very well in loose sand either. Now the next thing to consider is noise level. Some generators put out quite a lot of noise, and I'll talk about that a little more later. But if you have a generator you're going to run in a campground where you have nearby campers, you'll want to get a generator that has minimal amount of noise output. And lastly, in considerations is fuel type. You'll find generators that run off of diesel, gasoline, and liquid propane. So you'll want to consider that. Some of the generators run on dual fuel, which would be gasoline and liquid propane. That gives you a lot of flexibility in determining what fuel you'd like to run. So those are the four things. First off, the capacity, the weight, the noise, and the fuel. Consider those 4 things when shopping for a generator. So I have a question that is, what's the difference between a conventional generator and an inverter generator? A conventional generator produces alternating current, and an inverter generator produces alternating current, which is converted into direct current, DC, and then it's filtered and produced again as alternating current. The inverter generator gives you the cleanest power available. So if you're going to run sensitive electronics off of your generator, an inverter generator is the way to go. Also, the noise level of inverter generators is quite lower than the traditional, what they call the construction type open frame generators. Those type of open frame generators, if there's one in the campground, you're going to hear it because they are loud and they don't produce clean, smooth power for your sensitive electronics. The downside to an inverter generator is the cost. They're going to be quite a bit more expensive than the conventional generators, but in the long run, they're really worth the extra cost. So let's talk about fuel a little bit. Question I have is, what's the difference in the fuel types and what's some considerations? Well, I mentioned that diesel is usually a fuel type you'll more than likely find only with a motorhome generator. For fifth wheels, you're most likely to find liquid propane. If you're carrying a portable generator that you're going to use for camping, then you can get any that you prefer. I mentioned earlier about a dual fuel, which is a liquid propane and gasoline. If you have something like that, you have the option of selecting which fuel type you would like to use. A common problem with gasoline engines is that if you let the fuel sit in the engine, it's going to varnish the carburetor and it's going to be difficult or maybe impossible to crank in a few weeks or a few months when you get around to trying to start it up again. If you use non-ethanol gasoline, it's going to minimize the amount of that varnishing that's in the carburetor, and it's going to give you much better service. So I do recommend, if you're using gasoline, try to use the non-ethanol gasoline. A question from Rick is, can a propane generator use the RV liquid propane disconnect? And the answer is yes. You can use the propane that's in your RV tanks. Now, you have to understand that LP is run through a regulator at your RV, and some generators may have their own regulator. So you can't run 2 regulators in line with each other because it's going to reduce the amount of fuel flow to a point where it's not going to work. If you have a liquid propane generator and you can bypass the regulator, then you should be able to connect to the quick disconnect of your RV. If you cannot remove that regulator, then you might try getting a Y connector or extended hose to connect directly to one of your LP holding tanks. The number one question I see in regards to RV generators is, what size generator do I need to run my RV? Sometimes people will phrase that question, what do I need to run a 30 amp RV or maybe a 50 amp RV? And those questions are very difficult to answer. You need to decide what devices you want to operate and what are the wattages required to operate those devices. So if you're wanting to operate an air conditioner, for example, the rule of thumb is you'll need about 32 or 3,300 watts to run the typical 13.5 thousand BTU air conditioner. Now, what happens with something like an air conditioner, it has a surge start, meaning that it takes a higher wattage to start the air conditioner than it does to run it after you get it started. So consider that as well when you're selecting generators, because they will come and list a surge rating and a running rating. So understand the difference between the two. So sizing the generator is going to be based upon your needs. If you do not need an air conditioner, you can get by with a much smaller generator. Frequently, I see RVers purchasing the 2,000 or 2,200 watt generators, which weigh about 40 pounds. They look like a big fat suitcase. They're easy to handle. You can lift them up and put them into the back of your truck without much difficulty, but they're not big enough to run a generator. So some people will get 2 of those smaller generators, and you can get a wiring harness that hooks the 2 together, and then that will produce enough power to run your air conditioner. If you do elect to go with 2 small generators to run your air conditioner, there's some considerations. Not only just storing the 2 separate generators, but providing fuel to both of them. You have to do maintenance on 2 generators, and it does get a little bit complicated. Many people do that, and that's just the process they have in place. I found it a little bit cumbersome to go that route, and I've gone with a larger generator as my preference. And I say that because for me, having an air conditioner is a mandatory requirement. I live in the South, and pretty much anywhere you go in the South, in spring, summer, and fall, air conditioning is probably going to be required. If you live in a more moderate climate where air conditioning is not required or very infrequently required, the smaller generator may fit you perfectly. Kelly has asked a question, how do I connect my RV to the generator? And that's an excellent question, because the receptacles you find on your generator may be different than your standard RV connections. On the smaller generators we talked about, which are the 2,000 to 2,200 watt range, you're just going to see a typical 20 amp receptacle there. You're not going to see an RV plug. On the larger generators, 3,000, 3,500 and up, you're going to have a generator plug, which is usually a 3-prong or 4-prong twist-on plug, or in some very limited cases, you may actually have a 30 amp RV plug on that generator. So depending upon which generator you go with, you'll have to make sure you have the appropriate adapters to plug into the generator. Adapters are available at, of course, RV stores. Some are available at Walmart, and Amazon has every adapter that you can imagine. So those are some sources, and make sure you have the right adapter before you go out on that trip. Okay, the next question is, what brands do I recommend? Well, there are several brands out there that are very good, and you'll get good service out of them. There are many brands out there which I consider generic brands, because one manufacturer will produce a generator with different coverings on it for different outlets. For example, a Westinghouse and an Onan portable generator may come from the same manufacturer. It's going to be different colors, but you can look and you can see how the controls are laid out to see if it matches a different brand. Typically, the most common generators that you're going to see are going to be Honda, Champion, and Predator. Let me talk a little bit about each one of those. Honda generators have a very good reputation for longevity, running a long time, years and years. And that might be part of the reason they come with a higher price tag. In many cases, a Honda generator may be twice the expense of one of the other brands. Honda makes a 2200 generator that is very commonly used with RVers. The next one up would be 3,000 watt generator, and the downside of that generator is it weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of about 150 pounds. Champion makes some excellent generators, and one thing that makes Champion stand out from the others is that it offers a 3-year warranty on its products. But they make the smaller generators, the suitcases, about 2,200 watts. Predator generators are sold by Harbor Freight. And as far as these types of inverter generators go, they are some of the cheapest you're going to find. They have a 2,200 watt model and a 3,500 watt model, which is very popular. So they come in cheaper than what you'll find the Champions and the Hondas. But again, all the ones I just mentioned are inverter generators, and that's where I would kind of steer you in that direction and not to go for a construction type open frame generator. So let me give you some closing comments here that if you are shopping for a generator, understand what type of camping you're going to do. That is dry camping, boondocking, and understand what your requirements are going to be to run specific appliances. You don't want to get a generator too big, and you certainly don't want to get a generator too small for the job. So do your homework. Look in my books. There's charts in my books that gives you typical wattages and amperages for the appliances in your RV, and use that as a guide to determine what your power needs are going to be, and then shop for your generator in a very smart way. I love reading all of your comments, so if you got comments or questions, put them down below and let me know what you think. If there's things that you'd like me to cover in future videos, please let me know that as well. But thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, thanks for watching. There it is. So it cranked right up.